Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk H.P. Lovecraft. If you've not yet subscribed to our channel, please take a moment to do that now. All right, here we are, jumping into the second volume of this series. The first volume was The Crawling Chaos and Others. This one is called Medusa's Coil and Others. And today we are going to be reviewing the namesake story of that collection, Medusa's Coil. Medusa's Coil was written by Lovecraft and Zealia Bishop. I think this is their third collaboration, and it was published in January of 1939 in Weird Tales, where most of his work was eventually published. This is a bit of a challenging one. Among those who have read it, this is being called Lovecraft's most overtly racist story. And yes, Lovecraft was a reputed racist in his lifetime, which is, I'm not apologizing, but let's just say that so were a lot of people in 1930s, and it's a little weird to judge people out of the place and time. This is when Hitler's coming to power, so you expect a lot of racism in the world. Lovecraft surely wasn't the only racist. But the way that I like to deal with stories that feature troubling elements, people would say problematic elements these days, my choice is to, I don't view it as autobiographical. I review in the context of the story. What's said on the page is the inner workings of the minds of the characters, not of the author. And anybody who's ever written anything, created any art, there's this idea that, the art moves through you, which is a theme in this story. So that's how I'm going to look at it. So without further ado, Medusa's Coil. Synopsis: a man driving a topless roadster through Missouri stops at a dilapidated plantation house looking for shelter. He figures that it's abandoned, but in fact there is an old man there. Old man DeRussi tells the narrator the story of this former plantation, and of his family's history, going back to the early 1800s when they left Louisiana, moved to Missouri, and built this plantation, which once had 200 slaves. In the years after the Civil War, of course, they lost their slaves, but kept on workers, and they survived, gradually falling from glory into this condition that you now find a dilapidated mansion. But along the way, in the early 1900s, his son Denis traveled to Paris to study. There he fell into a crowd of people who were interested in the occult, in seances and rituals and all of these things. And there's a lot of hucksters out there claiming, oh yes, I can convene with the spirit world. This is very much out of reality. Harry Houdini was into that scene. Or actually, no, he was against that scene. But rather, Arthur Conan Doyle, he's known to be part of this. But it was a big thing among the wealthy elite to try and summon spirits and all this shit. But he meets a girl there, Marcelina, and she's a practitioner of these arts, and she's very exotic and very captivated, and she gains the love and the infatuation of Denis, who brings her home to his father's plantation and plans to marry her. But Marceline, she makes everyone easy as much as she dominates them and sort of makes them feel obsessed about her, and it causes an uproar in the house, and a lot of the servants are trying to stay away, and people don't want to be anywhere near her if they can avoid it. But she's said to be very hypnotic in her nature and has this amazing black hair that she spends hours and hours oiling and working on, and some people would almost swear that it had a life of its own, that it was alive. A friend who knew Marceline in Paris, Frank Marshall, comes for a visit. He's been having trouble with his inspiration, and he just basically wants to be near Marceline. He tells his friend Denis, I'm not in love with her, but she is sort of my muse, and I want to paint her. While she is being painted, we later learn in the nude, Denis is sent to New York on business by his father, basically to get him away from the house, because he figures that she is being a bad influence, and it's slowly driving him mad, and he thinks that he can protect him by sending him away. But in the meantime, Frank Marsh does his painting up in the attic of Marceline naked, sitting there in the room. And the two of them increasingly have tension between each other, and he won't allow her to see the painting, and this is very, very frustrating. But Denis, feeling this sort of strange feeling, he comes home unexpectedly, but not before, or actually right at the same moment, as Marceline has murdered Frank because he won't let her see the painting, or she does finally see the painting. And then, of course, Denis abruptly uses his axe to murder Marceline, but not her hair. Her hair is still alive. Yes, Medusa's Coil. As it turns out, the painting is this ridiculous scene of Marceline in the backdrop of an underwater city called Relay. I can never pronounce it, which is, of course, you'll know as a Lovecraft fan, the underwater sunken city realm of Cthulhu. And it would appear that she was an immortal goddess from that land, and she was, in fact, the basis for the entire Medusa myth of the woman with the snakes in her hair that turns everyone to stone. Of course, she doesn't turn anyone to stone, but we'll overlook that part just for now. So now you got two dead bodies, and you've got a very distraught Denis, who confronts his father, tells him everything. They see the painting, but not before Denis kills himself. Basically now left alone, the father, he buries the bodies in the basement, and he constantly feels haunted by it. And there's rumors of a snake-like creature, her hair, crawling around the property, taking revenge on people and causing general anarchy. But over the decades, the house falls into disrepair, but he's there protecting the painting, and up until the moment when our narrator arrives. He takes the narrator finally upstairs to see it. The narrator sees it. Yes, this is what I see. It's this horrible thing from the Elder World. He shoots it remarkably with a gun that he apparently had in his pocket the entire time, and the painting disintegrates into nothing. At that moment, you hear a sound in the basement, and the father fears that, oh God, she's risen from the dead. She's coming to strike her revenge on me. So they run out of the room, dropping a candle. Candle lights the entire plantation building, the house on fire. And as they're driving away, as he's driving away, the character swears that he sees the old man being chased by the dead body, dug up, her hair missing because it was chopped off, and he pulls away. Farther down the road, he comes across a farmer, tells him that I spent the night at a farmhouse, and now I'm on my way back to town. Can you tell me how to find it? And the farmer's like, where did you stay? There's nothing out here, except for, that house that burnt down 6 years ago. So it turns out that none of this was actually happening in real time. He was somehow living the memory of this curse, this coil of Medusas, trapped in it forever. But before the whole thing ends, he does reveal one more secret. Having looked at the painting, he reveals that, the horror, that Marceline was in fact black. So as I was pointing out, this is called Lovecraft's most overtly racist story. There's been times in the past in this series, going back 4 or 5 years ago, doing these reviews where I'd get into the racist elements, talk about Lovecraft and say, Lovecraft is a racist. This sounds racist, and I've sort of moved on from that way of viewing things. As I said up top, I try to look at the story within itself. Fiction is fiction. It's not real life. It's not autobiographical. Even if you're taking elements from your own thoughts and feelings, there's sort of this idea in art that art moves through the artist, and at a certain point, a story can tend to write itself. I'm going to say that that's sort of what's happening here, whether it's true or not. I think that's just the best way to deal with fiction. If you don't do that, otherwise you start finding yourself editing stories and just totally dismissing stories and judging them against a world that no longer exists. the characters in this story are reprehensible racists. The old man remembers a time of slavery and of plantations, and even the narrator, the younger man, he's still operating in the early 20th century. Right-wing racist fascism is sweeping the world, especially Europe. Hitler, as the story's being written, Hitler's come to power and getting ready to launch World War II. So all of that is happening, and you would expect these people to be pretty reprehensible. And at no point does Lovecraft paint any of these people as being role models, as being people who you should look up to and who you should like. These are characters that are very clearly meant to be disliked. Even the narrator, not that likable. And you get very, very little of the narrator himself, actually. 3 or 4 of these stories in these collections that I've been reading recently have been where you have a narrator, he's telling a story, and then he meets a character, and then you spend almost the entire rest of the story hearing that character tell the story to the narrator, which is very confusing. It's a very clunky, weird way to tell a story, which I don't recommend if you're writing stories today and trying to emulate Lovecraft. But it does seem to work for him quite a bit. I think that there's another way of looking at this story, just aside from the racism, and how reprehensible these characters are. And this one might blow your mind, but Marceline is a powerful female protagonist. She's a powerful black woman who fooled them all, God forbid, but let's reframe her. She's exotic, she's captivating. These men all fall in love with her, and I don't gather that it has anything to do with her power. I think it's her presence. And eventually, she gets her revenge on all of them, even from beyond the grave. So if that's not a powerful female character, I don't know what is. So that's another way of looking at this story. And I don't know, how intentional it would be on the part of the author. And here I go, again, interjecting reality into the thing, which I just spent several minutes explaining why you shouldn't do that. But it is a rare instance of Lovecraft writing a pretty badass female character. But she's also an evil priestess, so there is that. Yeah, most of you if you've made it this far into the video, you're gonna call me an evil apologist for racism, and that's not all the case. I abhor racism, but I love art, and here I am judging what's on the story, what's on the page, and what I really love about the whole thing when it comes down to it is this idea of inspiration of art moving through you, from beyond you, being able to create something that is not completely of you, or something that is more than what you are, where it's transcendent and you don't quite understand how it could come to be, how you could create your masterpiece. And this is what Frank Marsh does here. But what's best about it is that this is it's an artistic creation, this painting of Relier, and it's horrifying. It invokes fear and loathing and this cosmic existential terror that Lovecraft does so well, and I love that because, well, one, I'm into dark, heavy metal music. Sounds that are unsettling. I like disturbing, transgressive movies, things like that. I love disturbing fiction like Lovecraft. And what's happening in our world today, and this is the big takeaway, this is why people on the far right, or people in the middle, are so pissed off at the far left and the far right, because both sides keeps trying to censor us and sanitize us and use the arts to their own ends. And in the middle, you have the Disneys of the world who continually sanitize their creations, trying to offend nobody. And what happens when you work so hard to not offend anybody is you also begin to stop providing any substance of any kind to people, not even joy, because you can't have true joy and true positive emotions without the negative to counterbalance them against, which is why you end up with Star Wars movies and Marvel movies and Indiana Jones movies that on the outside they look like the movies you remember from your youth, but really they're not, because they lack the they have kid gloves on and they lack the substance, and they lack the risk of going a little bit farther, possibly too far at times, and they don't do any of that. They just sort of rest neatly in the middle, hoping to appeal to the most people, but providing nothing to them of any value, no substance, no transcendence, nothing like that. So I think that Medusa's Coil, while not Lovecraft's best story, and it certainly should have ended about 5 pages sooner, I think there's still a lot that we can take away from it, and that's why you can't be burning books, you can't be banning books. You need to make this old stuff available, keep it preserved. It's something to learn from. You shouldn't sit here and say, I love racism. No, you shouldn't, but you should learn from what's on the page, from the situation. Don't be mad at the past. Use it as a learning tool, so you can contrast the world that Lovecraft was writing in with the world that we live in today. And I think what you'll find out is, although the world we're living in today isn't perfect, we've come a long way. On the whole, we've gotten a lot better. We still have some work to do, but we need the Lovecrafts of the world to remind us that just a couple of generations ago, racism was not just existence, but it was acceptable, and it was in the lives of many people the norm, and that's pretty disturbing. And I hate to say it, but the way things have been looking recently, we're just that one step back to a much worse place. But there you go, Medusa's Coil. Let's talk H.P. Lovecraft. Thank you, and until next time, keep it creepy.